Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the frozen heart of Alberta, into its forgotten corners and isolated small towns buried beneath endless wilderness, places where help does not reach. Here, 7 of the most disturbing, real, and terrifying true horror stories have emerged, whispered by people who survived what should not have been possible. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people. Accounts meant to be forgotten, but never truly erased. From abandoned farmhouses to things moving beneath frozen lakes. From basements hiding secrets to disappearances that defy explanation. Tonight, you will hear horrors that linger long after the lights go out. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Alberta, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this happened when I was 29. During the winter, I took a maintenance job in a dying Alberta town called Blackill Creek. I didn't move there chasing adventure. I moved because my marriage was collapsing, my savings were gone, and Blackill Creek paid cash under the table. The town sat along a frozen highway, surrounded by forest so dense it swallowed sound. Fewer than 200 people lived there, most of them old, quiet, and strangely watchful. They never asked where I came from, only how long I planned to stay. When I told them just the winter, more than one person nodded like they already knew how that would end. My job was simple. Keep the streetlights running through the long polar nights. One light in particular, at the edge of town near the creek, kept failing. Every time I fixed it, it went dark again. The locals called it the last light, and they warned me never to stand beneath it after sundown. The first night I repaired the light, I noticed how unnaturally quiet Blackill Creek became after sunset. No dogs barked, no engines passed on the highway. Even the wind seemed to slow once darkness settled in. As I climbed the ladder, my breath fogged thick inside my hood, and the snow beneath my boots creaked like it was alive. Halfway up, I felt it, that sensation of being watched. Not glanced at, but measured. I told myself it was paranoia, the isolation getting to me. Still, I kept my eyes fixed on the bulb, refusing to look toward the tree line across the frozen creek. When the light flickered back on, casting a weak amber circle onto the snow, I finally glanced down. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't human. Too long, too narrow. They began at the edge of the forest and stopped directly beneath the light, right where I'd been standing moments earlier. No tracks led away. The next morning, the light was out again, and the footprints were gone. The third time the light failed, I went during the day. I told myself whatever was happening only felt worse at night, and daylight would make it obvious. Faulty wiring, moisture, old equipment. That's what logic said. But daylight didn't make Blackill Creek feel safer. It made it emptier. Curtains were drawn tight. Doors stayed shut. As I worked, I noticed something carved into the metal pole beneath layers of peeling paint. Old scratch marks, deep and uneven, like someone had clawed at the steel for years. When I asked Martha, the woman who ran the general store, about the marks, she went still. Her hands froze mid-count over the register. She told me the light wasn't installed for traffic. It was installed to keep something back. She said the creek wasn't always frozen. Decades ago, people used to hear splashing at night, followed by screaming. The light came after. So did the silence. That night, from my rented room, I watched the glow at the edge of town flicker and slowly dim. I broke the rule that night. I told myself I only needed to observe, not interfere. I parked my truck a short distance away and walked toward the last light as dusk bled into darkness. The forest across the creek looked thicker than usual, like the trees had leaned closer while no one was watching. As I stepped into the circle of amber light, my radio crackled to life on my belt. Not voices, breathing. Slow, wet, too close. I spun around, heart hammering, but the road behind me was empty. Then the snow beneath my boots shifted. Something moved under the ice of the creek, massive enough to ripple the frozen surface. Cracks spidered outward, glowing faintly in the light. From beneath the ice, a shape pressed upward, just enough for me to see a distorted outline. Long limbs, bent wrong, pacing directly below me. The streetlight flickered violently, and in that strobing glow, I realized the light wasn't failing. Something was reaching for it. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. Only the sound of ice cracking and the instinct screaming that whatever was beneath the creek had noticed me. My boots slipped as I sprinted back toward the truck, the streetlight behind me stuttering like a dying heartbeat. I didn't look back until I slammed the door shut and locked it, hands shaking so badly I dropped the keys. That's when something struck the side of the truck. Not hard enough to dent the metal, but deliberate. Curious. I froze, listening. Another impact followed, lower this time, like knuckles tapping steel. Through the fogged window, I saw a silhouette pass through the light's glow, tall, thin, and moving, with a slow, patient confidence that felt old. The light went out completely. In the sudden darkness, the tapping stopped. My radio crackled again, the same wet breathing filling the cab. I started the engine and floored it, headlights slicing through snow as I fled toward town. Behind me, something screamed. Not loud, but close enough to rattle my bones. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, Blackill Creek looked exactly the same, quiet, frozen, indifferent. But the people were different. They watched me openly now. When I entered the general store, conversation died instantly. Martha studied my face like she was counting how much time I had left. I told her what I saw. I expected denial, excuses, anything normal. Instead, she nodded. She said the thing beneath the creek had many names, but none spoken aloud anymore. It followed the light, she explained, because the light reminded it of when it was trapped. When the bulb weakened, it tested the boundary. When someone stood beneath it, the thing learned their shape. I asked her why the town didn't just leave. She leaned in close and whispered that Blackill Creek wasn't keeping it contained. The town was keeping us distracted. That afternoon, the power flickered across town for the first time in years, and every streetlight, except the last one, went dark. By nightfall, the town was running on generators. Houses glowed faintly, one by one, like nervous eyes refusing to close. The only true darkness pooled at the edge of Blackill Creek, where the last light still burned, steady now, unnaturally bright, as if drawing breath before a scream. Martha came to my door just after sunset. She carried a bundle of old photographs and a rusted maintenance log wrapped in cloth. The pictures showed the creek decades ago, unfrozen, crowded with people. In the water, barely visible, were shapes beneath the surface, long shadows twisted around human legs. The log explained the truth. The light wasn't a barrier, it was bait. Every few years, someone had to stand beneath it when the thing grew restless. Someone the town could afford to lose. Martha told me I'd already been chosen. The light responded to me now. Outside, the generator sputtered. Across town, windows went dark. And from the creek, I heard ice breaking, slow, deliberate, coming closer than ever before. I tried to leave. The highway out of Blackill Creek vanished into a wall of blowing snow, my headlights reflecting back like I was driving into a mirror. Every road looped me closer to the creek, closer to the light. The radio whispered again, not breathing this time, but my own voice, repeating things I'd never said. When the truck died, I stepped out into knee-deep snow and saw the truth. The forest had shifted. Trees stood where the road should have been, their trunks bent inward, forming a corridor leading straight to the last light. Under it, the snow had melted into slush. Something massive pressed up from below, cracking the ice wide enough for a shape to rise, taller than any man, its limbs jointed wrong, its surface slick and pale like something that had never known air. It didn't rush me. It waited, because it knew the light wasn't protecting me anymore. It was calling me home. I don't remember stepping forward, only realizing I was already beneath the light. The heat from the bulb burned against my face, too warm for winter, too alive. The thing rose higher, ice collapsing around it like a breaking shell. I could smell it then. Stagnant water, rot, and something electrical, like scorched metal. Images flooded my head that weren't mine. Men standing where I stood now. Women screaming from the creek's edge. The light flaring bright each time the thing took someone, then dimming as it fed. This was the cycle. Not imprisonment, exchange. The creature lowered its head, if you could call it that, and I saw reflections of myself on its slick surface. Dozens of versions, all older, all hollow. It reached out, fingers splitting into smaller tendrils as they brushed my chest. The streetlight screamed as the bulb shattered. And in the darkness, something inside me broke with it. I woke up in a hospital in Edmonton 3 days later with frostbite scars and no memory of how I escaped. Doctors said I'd been found wandering the highway, naked, muttering about lights that watched people sleep. Blackill Creek wasn't on any map they checked. I tried to go back. The highway ended in forest, no town, no creek, no tracks. But some nights, when the streetlights outside my apartment flicker, I feel it again, that measuring presence, patient and familiar. I've noticed the lights dim slightly when I walk beneath them, just for a second, like they recognize me. Last week, I found scratch marks on the metal pole outside my building. Fresh ones, deep. I've started dreaming of cold water and broken ice, of a place waiting for its light to fail. If you're hearing this and your town has a streetlight that never quite works, don't stand under it. My name is Caleb Morrison, and this happened when I was 34. During the winter, I took a survey contract near a shrinking mining town in northern Alberta called Ridgeway Crossing. I wasn't chasing danger. I was chasing stability. For my daughter, for myself. The job paid well, but only because no one stayed long enough to complain. Ridgeway Crossing sat above an abandoned mine network, buried under snow and rock. The locals said the tunnels were sealed decades ago after an incident, but no one would explain what that meant. They just told me not to work after dark and never to follow voices if I heard them under the snow. At first, the town felt ordinary. Quiet diners, tired faces, polite distance. But at night, the ground felt wrong. Too hollow, too awake. When I placed my survey markers, I sometimes felt vibrations beneath my boots, like something shifting far below. The first time I heard the voices, I thought it was the wind. They were calling my name. The voices didn't sound threatening. That's what made them dangerous. They were calm, familiar. Sometimes my daughter's laugh. Sometimes my ex-wife calling me back inside like I'd forgotten something important. Each time I froze, heart pounding, reminding myself they couldn't possibly be real. I asked Gordon, the motel owner, if sound carried strangely around Ridgeway Crossing. His jaw tightened. He said the snow packed sound downward, into the ground, into places it shouldn't go. Then he warned me never to answer back. That night, I woke to knocking. Not on my door, but beneath my bed. Slow, rhythmic, like someone testing the thickness of the floor. I lay there sweating as the sound moved, traveling through the building, stopping directly under my room. Then came the whisper. "Caleb, we're cold." By morning, I found footprints outside my window. They weren't leading away from the motel. They were leading into the ground. The next day, I went to the town archives, a single-room office attached to the fire station that smelled like dust and burned coffee. I told myself I needed maps, old mine schematics, anything to understand what was under my feet. The clerk, Elaine, hesitated before unlocking a filing cabinet she clearly hadn't opened in years. Inside were photographs taken after the mine closure. Men stood at the tunnel entrance, faces blurred as if the camera couldn't focus on them. Elaine told me the official report blamed a collapse, but the miners who survived claimed the tunnels had answered back when they called out. Voices came from the walls, from the floor, from inside their own heads. The mine was sealed after 3 workers followed those voices into a new shaft that wasn't on any map. They were never recovered. That evening, as I placed my final markers, the snow vibrated beneath me again. This time, the voices didn't call my name. They were counting. The counting followed me back to the motel. 1, 2, 3, always stopping just short of 10. Each number rose from beneath the snow, from beneath the floorboards, from beneath my thoughts. I tried to drown it out with the television, but the audio warped, stretching the numbers into distorted echoes. I finally snapped and shouted back, telling whatever it was to leave me alone. The moment the words left my mouth, the motel went silent. No heater, no wind, no distant highway noise. The counting resumed, faster now, excited. I felt the floor dip beneath my feet, just slightly, like the ground had taken a breath. Outside, the snow around the motel had collapsed into shallow depressions, dozens of them, all facing my room. They weren't footprints. They were impressions, like heads pressing up from below, listening. That night, I dreamed of tunnels growing toward the surface, branching closer with every number spoken aloud. In the dream, the voices reached 10. By the 5th day, the ground no longer felt solid anywhere in Ridgeway Crossing. Every step carried a hollow echo, like walking on the ceiling of something vast. I tried to leave early that morning, but my truck refused to start, the engine clicking in a steady rhythm that matched the counting I'd been hearing in my sleep. I went to Gordon for help. He didn't look surprised when I told him. He said the voices always chose someone who had reason to listen, someone carrying guilt, someone who missed people enough to answer back. He admitted his brother had vanished into the mine years ago after hearing their mother's voice calling from below. That afternoon, the snow near the sealed mine entrance began to sink. Not collapse, sink, like something beneath it was exhaling. Wooden warning signs tilted inward, pulled by unseen hands. From deep underground, the voices called again. This time, they spoke in unison. "Come down. We've made room. I don't remember walking to the mine." I remember standing there, staring into the sealed entrance as the concrete barrier vibrated softly, like a speaker turned low. The voices weren't whispering anymore. They were cheerful, welcoming. Cracks spread across the seal, hairline fractures leaking warm air that smelled like damp earth and old metal. My radio burst to life, relaying the same numbers again, 1 through 9, over and over. Then I felt hands on my boots, not grabbing, guiding. The snow peeled back in smooth, careful layers as the ground opened beneath me, revealing a shaft that shouldn't exist. Its walls pulsed faintly, lined with marks that looked like fingernails dragged upward for decades. I screamed for help, but the town stayed silent. As I slid downward, the voices spoke softly, almost tender. "Almost 10, they said. And somewhere deep below, something shifted closer to the surface. The shaft seemed endless. I slid and fell through the darkness for what felt like hours, yet my body wasn't bruised or scraped. The walls pulsed beneath my fingers, warm and alive, as if the mine itself were breathing. The voices surrounded me now, not above or below, but inside my skull, repeating the same cadence. 1, 2, 3, but faster, urgent, impatient. Faint lights appeared along the walls, revealing shadows pressed against the stone. Faces, hundreds of them. Pale, hollow, mouths open as if silently screaming. Some looked young, some looked impossibly old. All of them were staring at me. Not angrily, not threateningly, expectantly. I tried to back away, but my feet sank into the floor as if the mine itself was holding me. The voices shifted, merging into a single tone that pulsed with intent. And then a new voice joined them. Mine. Speaking numbers I didn't know I knew. The walls began to tremble. Something massive moved below, moving up toward me through the tunnels. The deeper I went, the warmer the air became, but it wasn't comfort. It was suffocating. Every breath felt drawn out of me by the walls themselves. The shadows pressed closer, their faces flickering between the living and something inhuman. I stumbled over a mound of snow like ash. When I brushed it away, I saw hands, more than a dozen, protruding from the ground, pale and elongated, reaching upward as if begging for me to join them. I screamed, but the sound was absorbed instantly by the pulsing walls. The counting accelerated in my head, no longer numbers, but syllables, whispers, memories I didn't own. And then I saw it. The source. A massive shape, buried under layers of ice and stone, thrashing slowly, stretching toward the surface. Its tendrils curled through the tunnels like roots, brushing faces pressed against the walls, pulling them inward. The voices stopped. Silence filled the mine. Then one last whisper echoed, clear and deliberate. I don't remember how I ran. The floor gave way beneath me as if the mine wanted me to leave. Yet the walls pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The voices inside my head had become a chorus, chanting the final numbers. 7, 8, 9. Each word felt like ice carving through my skull. Then I saw the surface. Light spilling through cracks, brighter than the midday sun, yet distorted, almost golden. I lunged for it, but the tendrils wrapped around my legs, pulling gently but insistently downward. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were guiding me, teaching me, showing me what had been waiting all these years under Ridgeway Crossing. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of the frozen forms of miners, children, women, everyone who had vanished into the tunnels before me, pressing upward from the depths, still alive, still waiting. The light above flickered, and in that instant, I realized the counting had reached 10. I woke up on the snow outside Ridgeway Crossing, alone. My boots were missing, my hair frozen with frost, and the snow around me was smooth, without a trace of footprints. The mine entrance was sealed again, as if it had never moved. The town looked normal from the highway, though eerily silent. No cars, no lights, no signs of life. In the days that followed, I heard whispers in my dreams, counting softly from 1 to 10. Sometimes I wake to hear them under my bed or in the hum of city traffic. The memory of the mine, of the faces, of the tendrils, feels real enough to make me shiver even now. I never returned to Ridgeway Crossing. But sometimes, when snow falls thick in the suburbs, I notice depressions in the yard, perfectly shaped like hands reaching upward. And I know that one day, the counting will begin again. My name is Lydia Harper, and this happened when I was 26. I had taken a winter retreat in a remote cabin near Pine Hollow, a tiny, nearly abandoned Alberta town surrounded by dense conifer forests and frozen lakes. I needed solitude to write, to escape the chaos of city life. But Pine Hollow had a reputation I dismissed as small-town superstition. The town had fewer than 50 residents, all wary and silent, eyes that lingered too long before looking away. They warned me about the cabin, a wooden structure tucked along the edge of a frozen lake. "Never stay past sundown alone," one man muttered. I laughed, thinking he meant wild animals or old wiring. The first night, the wind howled around the cabin, rattling windows and doors. But the unsettling part wasn't the storm. It was the silence inside. No creaks, no settling wood, just nothing. And then, just as I settled into my desk, I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock coming from the cabin's basement. I didn't have a basement key. I tried to convince myself it was the wind or branches brushing the foundation. But the knocking came again, deliberate and rhythmic. I crept to the trapdoor at the floor and pressed my ear against it. The sound stopped. My pulse raced. Then came a whisper, soft, almost intimate. "Lydia." I stumbled back, heart hammering. The voice was female, familiar, but I couldn't place it. It didn't belong to anyone in Pine Hollow. I banged on the trapdoor, shouting, demanding someone tell me what was there. No reply, just silence. The next day, I asked the local grocer about the cabin. His eyes went cold. He told me the house had belonged to a recluse who vanished 50 years ago. Some nights, he said, visitors reported hearing knocks, whispers, even footsteps in the snow around the cabin. But those who investigated never returned the same. That night, alone, I swore I saw faint footprints forming in the snow outside the cabin, leading toward the trapdoor. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin floor sounded like footsteps pacing above me. Every gust of wind became a whisper. By midnight, the knocking returned, soft, measured, insistent. My hands shook as I lifted the trapdoor handle. The basement stairs were steep and narrow, disappearing into darkness that seemed to breathe. I didn't see anything at first, just the smell. Damp earth, rot, and something faintly metallic. Then I noticed the walls. Scratches, deep and old, curling upward like claw marks. The air was thick, oppressive, pressing against my chest with every breath. I heard the whisper again. "Lydia." It came from the far corner. I raised my flashlight, the beam trembling. Shadows twisted in the darkness, forming shapes that were almost human. They crouched, watching me, waiting. The basement was empty and full at the same time. Somewhere, water dripped, echoing like a heartbeat. And I realized, whatever had been in this house before me had never left. I backed up, but the stairs seemed to stretch farther than they should, longer and narrower, like the cabin itself had changed shape. The whispers multiplied, overlapping, soft cries, murmurs, laughter, coming from every corner of the basement. My flashlight flickered as if the darkness itself was swallowing its light. Then I saw them. Small figures, hunched, pale, their faces blurred but recognizably human. They moved unnaturally, their limbs bending at wrong angles, advancing silently. Yet the floor made no sound beneath them. I stumbled backward, my foot hitting the trapdoor. Something grabbed the edge, hard, insistent. I pulled, but it clung, pulling me downward. I screamed, the sound swallowed instantly by the basement walls. I yanked free and bolted out, slamming the trapdoor behind me. The knocking didn't stop. It continued on the other side, as though whatever lived below was testing the wood, learning its strength. Outside, the snow was untouched. No footprints. Nothing. But the air felt alive. The following morning, I convinced myself the basement had been a trick of my imagination. Cold, sleep-deprived hallucinations. Yet the cabin felt wrong. Every surface seemed to watch me. Every shadow lingered longer than it should. I tried to focus on writing, but the scratching sound returned, soft, like nails against wood, following me wherever I moved. I stepped outside to clear my head. The snow was pristine, yet I felt eyes on me. The trees along the lake were too still, and the wind had stopped completely. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Small, pale shapes darting between the trees. They vanished before I could turn fully. That night, the knocking returned, louder and more insistent. This time, it was on the walls, on the ceiling, from the floor beneath my feet. I tried to ignore it, but when I pressed my ear to the trapdoor, the whispers returned. "Lydia, come down. We've been waiting." I realized I wasn't alone in the cabin. I hadn't been for decades. I tried to leave. My truck was buried under fresh snow, tires frozen solid. The forest seemed to close in, branches curling toward the cabin like skeletal fingers. I went back inside, desperate to find another exit. Every door I opened revealed the same small, cold hallway I had left. The cabin itself seemed alive, rearranging its rooms, extending its halls, suffocating me with familiarity. The basement trapdoor rattled violently. Something was beneath, pressing against it. I could hear footsteps pacing, slow and deliberate. Then the whispers multiplied, overlapping voices, calling me by name in tones both desperate and amused. I realized they weren't outside the trapdoor. They were inside my head. I stumbled backward and fell against the fireplace, knocking over a small lamp. The flame flickered, casting shadows across the room. And in those shadows, I saw dozens of pale faces pressed against the walls, watching, waiting. I understood then. The cabin wanted me. I could no longer ignore the basement. The knocking had become pounding, echoing through every wall, every floorboard, every corner of the cabin. It wasn't just a sound. It was a summons. My body moved against my will as I approached the trapdoor. The cold air that rose from beneath smelled of rot and wet stone, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that made my stomach twist. I lifted the trapdoor, and the darkness beneath seemed to stare back at me, alive and patient. The stairs stretched farther than logic allowed, deeper than the cabin should contain. Shadows danced along the walls, forming faces, shapes, and hands reaching for me. The whispers were louder now, chanting my name with excitement, almost joyous. A single low voice, different from the others, whispered urgently, "We've waited too long." I descended. Every step pulled me further into a place older than the forest, older than the snow, where the cabin's wood and stone were nothing more than a facade for something hungry and eternal. The basement opened into a cavern I could never have imagined. Stone walls twisted and pulsed like living tissue. The pale figures crouched and shifted, their limbs bending at unnatural angles. Hundreds of them surrounded me, silent, watching, pressing closer, but never touching. The air was thick, heavy, saturated with whispers. I realized the cabin wasn't built on land. It was built on them, a layer of life buried under centuries of snow, ice, and timber. The whispers became coherent. They told me stories of people who came before, of townsfolk who vanished, of the cabin itself, waiting to feed on curiosity and fear. A larger shadow moved at the back of the cavern. Its body bent and writhed like smoke, yet it had form, vague, humanoid, commanding. The smaller figures bowed toward it. And then the creature spoke, not with words, but directly into my mind. "You shouldn't have come alone." I understood in an instant. The cabin had never been mine to inhabit. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The air pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. The smaller figures began circling, their whispers rising in a chorus, building a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. The large shadow at the back stretched taller, its elongated limbs scraping the cavern ceiling, creating an eerie hum. I tried to scream, but the sound twisted into a whisper, repeating the cabin's name over and over. My mind was no longer my own. Memories that weren't mine flickered behind my eyes. Other people, other retreats, other disappearances in Pine Hollow, all drawn here by curiosity. Then it advanced. The pale figures knelt, parting like water to let it pass. The shadow's head, or what I assumed was its head, tilted toward me, and the whispers ceased. Silence filled the cavern, heavy and expectant. "You will stay. Like us." It spoke directly into my mind. I felt the pull, gentle but irresistible, dragging me toward the pulsing walls and the hollow beneath the cabin. I woke hours later, or maybe days, time was meaningless, in the main room of the cabin. The snow outside had melted slightly, leaving patches of mud. The trapdoor was closed again, perfectly sealed, as if nothing had disturbed it. My notebook lay open, pages blank, though I remembered writing in them. My body felt lighter, yet hollow, as if some part of me had never returned from below. The cabin was silent now, too quiet, expectant. Every night since, I've heard faint tapping beneath the floors, soft whispers in my sleep, calling my name. And sometimes, when I look into the corners of the cabin, I see pale faces pressed against walls, watching, waiting. I've left Pine Hollow and returned to the city, but the cabin remains in my mind. I know one day I'll hear it calling again, and I'll understand I was never meant to leave fully. The silent cabin of Pine Hollow never forgets. My name is Ethan Cross, and this happened when I was 29. I had joined a hiking expedition near Crimson Ridge, a remote stretch of Alberta mountains infamous among locals for sudden disappearances. I wasn't a thrill seeker. I just wanted to clear my mind and reconnect with nature after a messy breakup. The trailhead was marked by a weathered wooden sign, warning hikers to stay on path, do not follow the mist. I laughed it off at first, assuming it was a joke to scare tourists. The ridge itself was breathtaking. Jagged cliffs, dense pine forests, and a crimson-hued rock face glinting under the afternoon sun. But the air carried a strange stillness, heavy and unnatural, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. By the second hour, I noticed something odd. Footprints in the snow appeared ahead, leading off the trail, not my own, not from anyone in my group. They were human-sized, yet the snow beneath them was undisturbed beyond the impressions, as if the feet had floated just above the ground. And then I heard it. Soft breathing behind me, perfectly synchronized with my own heartbeat. I called out to my group, but no one answered. The forest seemed to absorb my voice, returning nothing but the soft crunch of my own boots. The footprints ahead didn't seem to belong to anyone I could see, yet they led in perfect straight lines, unnaturally direct through thick trees and patches of deep snow. I followed cautiously, curiosity and unease battling inside me. The air grew colder, the shadows darker. My breath fogged the air. Yet the temperature felt almost warm along the path of the prints, like the snow itself had been disturbed by something alive, still hot with unseen energy. Then I saw it. A figure at the edge of the trees. Human in shape, but the way it moved was wrong. Jerky, gliding rather than walking. I blinked, and it vanished. Only its footprints remained. A low guttural whisper echoed through the ridge, though the wind had died completely. "Ethan, follow." I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the trail had chosen me. I followed the trail deeper into the forest, my heart hammering with every step. The trees grew taller, their dark branches forming a canopy that blocked out the fading sun. The footprints continued, leading me over jagged rocks and through patches of snow so deep I struggled to keep my balance. Each time I tried to glance away, the faint glimmer of red rock reflected in the distance reminded me where I was. Then I heard it again, the soft breathing. But now it was accompanied by whispers. Names I didn't recognize, voices layered over each other, calling out in tones both pleading and mocking. The air thickened, making each breath laborious, like the forest itself was closing in around me. Suddenly, the footprint stopped at the edge of a cliff overlooking a frozen ravine. Ahead, a mist curled upward from the abyss, glowing faintly crimson in the dim light. My instinct screamed to turn back, but my feet moved forward, compelled. And then I saw a shadow shift in the mist. Too human to ignore, too inhuman to understand. I tried calling out again, but the mist swallowed my voice. The shadow moved closer, though it left no footprints, no disturbance of snow or ice. Every instinct in me screamed to flee, but the trail had me in its grip. My pulse pounded in my ears as the whispers became clearer, chanting numbers over and over, counting upward, 1, 2, 3, as if measuring me, testing me. The trail twisted unexpectedly, leading me along the cliff's edge with the wind howling beneath. My foot slipped, scraping against ice, and the shadow paused, tilting its head as if curious. Panic surged through me, but the trail didn't allow escape. I realized with horror that turning around wasn't an option. The forest had closed behind me, snow and trees moving unnaturally, sealing me in. A figure emerged fully from the crimson mist, humanoid but elongated, with hollow eyes that seemed to see straight into my mind. It didn't speak, yet I heard it. "Welcome, Ethan." The figure didn't move toward me. It glided, almost floating above the snow. Every instinct screamed to run, but the trail kept pulling me forward, as if invisible hands guided my feet. The whispers multiplied, overlapping into a cacophony that made my head spin. I stumbled over jagged rocks, arms flailing, heart hammering, yet the figure always stayed just ahead, watching, waiting. The crimson mist thickened, swirling around my legs and crawling up my torso like a living thing. The temperature dropped, frosting my eyelashes, but the shadow seemed unaffected. Its hollow eyes bore into mine, unblinking, knowing. I realized that the trail wasn't leading me to a place, it was leading me to it. Then came movement from the cliffs below, shapes twisting and writhing, partially hidden in mist. Faces, countless faces, pressed against the ice, watching silently. They weren't trying to speak. They were waiting. And I understood, with cold dread, that the shadow wanted me to join them. I fell to my knees, shaking, as the whispers merged into a single sentence. "You belong to Crimson Ridge now." I scrambled forward, desperation overriding fear. The trail seemed endless, twisting back on itself, moving me in loops I couldn't understand. Every time I glanced behind, the forest appeared empty, but the whispers followed, echoing inside my skull. My vision blurred from cold and exhaustion, yet the red rock cliffs glimmered ahead, guiding me with a cruel, unnatural certainty. The shadow mirrored me perfectly, stepping when I stepped, pausing when I paused. I tried to hide behind trees, but the forest seemed to bend, revealing me no matter where I ran. Each step left no footprints, yet the trail beneath me glowed faintly crimson, as if alive, feeding on my panic. I tripped again, sliding down a slope, snow spraying over me. When I looked up, the figure had vanished, leaving only whispers counting upward. 7, 8, 9. My chest tightened with dread. The final number was coming, and I knew I had no choice but to follow the trail to its end. The crimson trail led me to a narrow pass between two cliffs. The wind howled violently, carrying voices that weren't my own. Shadows stretched along the rock walls, twisting and reaching toward me, as if the cliffs themselves were alive. The mist thickened, curling like fingers around my legs, tugging me forward. And then I saw it. The shadow fully materialized atop a jagged outcrop, taller than any human, with elongated limbs that scraped against the cliff face. Its hollow eyes glowed faint red, and from its mouth, or what I assumed was a mouth, came a low, resonating hum that shook my chest. The faces from below rose in the mist, forming a writhing sea of pale observers, silent yet omnipresent. I tried to run, but the pass stretched endlessly, the cliffs bending impossibly, guiding me straight toward it. My feet moved of their own accord, compelled by the trail. Every instinct screamed that turning back wasn't possible, and the shadow raised an arm, pointing directly at me. "You're almost home," it intoned. The mist thickened so much that the world around me vanished. Only the shadow and the glowing trail remained. It moved closer, yet not in steps, sliding, gliding, bending as if the wind carried it. The pale faces in the mist reached upward, crying silently, their hollow eyes locked on me. I realized the trail was alive, feeding off my fear. Every step forward made my legs heavier, every breath harder. My mind spun as the whispers combined into a single voice, repeating my name and counting faster. 10, 11, 12. Numbers that didn't make sense, yet I felt their weight pressing on me like chains. Desperation clawed at me. I glanced around for an escape, but the cliffs curved impossibly, forming a corridor I couldn't leave. The shadow moved closer, stretching its elongated arm toward me. The whispers fell silent for a heartbeat. Then my own voice joined them, echoing from every direction, counting numbers I didn't remember learning. I understood then. The ridge didn't want me to escape. It wanted me to belong. The shadow loomed above me, its hollow eyes glowing brighter in the swirling crimson mist. My legs refused to move, as if the ridge itself had rooted me in place. The pale faces in the mist rose higher, forming a wall of watching, silent witnesses. Their eyes burned with expectation, and I realized I was not being hunted. I was being judged. The counting grew deafening inside my head. 13, 14, 15, numbers racing, yet somehow meaningful. like a heartbeat of the mountain itself. I felt the pull from the trail intensify, tugging at my chest, my mind dragging me toward the cliff edge. The wind tore at my clothes, howling through the canyon like thousands of voices calling my name. I had no choice. The shadow extended a hand, or something like it, and I felt an irresistible force lifting me, drawing me closer. Panic surged, yet beneath it, a strange clarity settled. The ridge wanted me to become part of its endless trail, a permanent mark in its story. I woke alone, curled in the snow at the base of the cliff, the ridge silent and empty. The crimson mist had vanished, and the trail appeared normal. Just snow, rocks, and the faint outline of the path I had followed. Yet something had changed. The whispers lingered in my mind, quiet but insistent, and my reflection in the frozen streams no longer looked entirely human. When I returned to town, the locals avoided my eyes. They didn't ask where I had been, nor did they warn me about the trail. I realized then that Crimson Ridge kept its secrets, sharing them only with those who survived, or thought they did. Sometimes, late at night, I can feel the ridge calling, tugging at my thoughts, counting again. Always counting. I know one day I may walk its trail again, and when that day comes, the mist will rise to meet me. My name is Clara Bennett, and this happened when I was 24. I had recently moved to a small Alberta town called Maple Creek, drawn by the promise of quiet and solitude. There was one landmark everyone spoke about with hushed voices: the old Maple Creek Bridge. Locals warned me never to cross it alone at night. Of course, I dismissed it as small-town superstition. The bridge spanned a murky creek surrounded by dense forest. Its wood was rotting in places, creaking under the weight of every passerby. I was out one night, chasing inspiration for my photography, when I noticed faint lights flickering beneath the bridge. At first, I assumed it was fireflies, or perhaps a reflection of the moon on the water. But the lights were too deliberate, moving rhythmically, almost beckoning me. As I approached, the air grew colder, unnaturally cold, and the creek's usual babble fell silent. My reflection in the water didn't match my movements perfectly. It lagged by a heartbeat. And then I heard it, a soft, hollow whisper from below. I peered over the edge, heart racing. The lights beneath the bridge were pale, moving in patterns that resembled human shapes. Yet their forms shimmered, shifting unnaturally. The creek itself seemed to ripple in ways that defied the current, as if something beneath it was controlling the water. The whisper came again, clearer this time. My name, Clara, drawn out slowly, almost playful, almost hungry. I stumbled back, but curiosity held me frozen. My camera hung from my neck, a useless talisman against the dread creeping up my spine. Then, a pale hand broke the surface of the water. It was translucent, icy, almost skeletal, yet human enough to make my stomach twist. The fingers beckoned toward me, curling slowly, deliberately. The whisper became multiple voices, overlapping, chanting in soft tones. Come closer. Join us. I knew then that the bridge held a secret far darker than anyone had warned me about. Something waited in Maple Creek, patient and ancient. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the water. The hand had vanished, but ripples still spread across the surface in unnatural circles. The whispers persisted, now layered with low, mournful wails that seemed to echo through the trees. My instinct screamed to leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. A sudden splash startled me. The water erupted, and dozens of pale, translucent faces pressed against the surface, mouths opening in silent screams. Their eyes were hollow, yet filled with intent, staring straight at me. I stumbled back onto the bridge, my camera swinging wildly and snapping photos in my panic. Then I noticed the reflection in the water. It was no longer just me. Behind my image, another figure stood, taller, darker, featureless, yet vaguely human, almost like a shadow carved from smoke. The whispering turned into a chorus, each voice overlapping mine. "You shouldn't have come." I realized with horror that whatever lurked beneath Maple Creek could see me. It knew me. I tried to run, but the bridge seemed alive. The wood creaked under my feet in unnatural rhythms, almost like it was breathing. The water beneath churned violently, sending icy splashes up the sides, though no wind blew. I could hear the soft tugging at my legs, invisible hands trying to pull me toward the creek. Suddenly, the shadow in the reflection stepped forward, and the faces beneath the water's surface rippled as if obeying its command. My camera slipped from my neck, clattering to the boards, and the photos inside flashed with brief, distorted images of people I didn't know, all staring at me with desperate eyes. The whispers grew louder, forming words I could barely understand. Join us, forever." Panic and fear surged. My heart hammered, my lungs burned. But a part of me was drawn toward the edge. Something was calling me, pulling me closer, promising I could never leave unless I obeyed. The creek had chosen me as its next victim. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. But the bridge seemed endless. Each step echoed unnaturally, magnifying my fear. The whispers became a cacophony, overlapping my own thoughts, repeating my name in tones that were pleading, mocking, and sinister all at once. The water beneath roiled as if alive, sending icy spray onto my face. Then I saw it clearly. The shadow from the reflection had detached itself from the water. It hovered just above the surface, humanoid yet distorted, its limbs bending in ways that defied nature. The pale faces followed it, rising higher in the creek, their mouths forming silent screams. My mind screamed to run, but the bridge beneath me shifted subtly, tilting, as if the structure itself wanted me to stumble. I realized the lights I had seen earlier weren't fireflies. They were trapped souls, glowing faintly, caught in the creek for decades. And now, the shadow wanted me to join them. The shadow moved closer, gliding above the water, and the faces followed in an eerie procession. Their hollow eyes seemed to pierce my soul, drawing me to the edge. My legs shook uncontrollably, yet the trail of fear compelled me forward. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum against the still night, blending with the whispers and the creek's unnatural sounds. I stumbled, falling onto my hands and knees. My camera lay nearby, flashing faint, distorted images of the bridge and the creek, showing glimpses of previous victims, people like me, trapped forever. The air grew colder, frost forming on my eyelashes. The shadow extended one elongated arm toward me, and I felt a force in my chest, pushing me, compelling me toward the water. I screamed, but my voice joined the chorus of whispers. My mind spun, torn between fleeing and the irresistible pull of the creek. I knew the bridge wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it wanted a new soul to claim. I crawled toward the edge, the shadow's arm reaching, elongating unnaturally, the pale faces closing in behind it. Every instinct screamed to flee, but my body felt frozen, held in place by an unseen force. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a roar of voices, all calling my name in tones both desperate and cruel. The shadow leaned closer, its featureless face only inches from mine. I could feel its cold, unnatural presence pressing against my skin, chilling me to the bone. The water beneath reflected not me, but hundreds of figures, eyes wide with terror, mouths open in eternal screams. I realized then that they weren't just trapped. They were feeding the shadow, sustaining it, and now it intended to do the same to me. I tried to move sideways, to escape its grasp, but the bridge twisted beneath my feet, narrowing impossibly. Panic surged. My mind screamed, but the whispers drowned everything, guiding me toward the water. The creek was alive, and it wanted me. The shadow reached for me fully, and for a moment, the world fell silent. No wind, no whispers, only the oppressive presence of the figure and the eyes beneath the water. My chest tightened, my limbs frozen, as though I were suspended in a nightmare. The pale faces rose higher, their mouths opening wider, screaming silently in unison. Then the water bubbled violently, glowing faintly crimson. The shadow merged partially with the creek, becoming fluid and solid at once, its form writhing like smoke over water. It beckoned me again, and I felt my will weakening, the pull of the bridge and creek nearly irresistible. I struggled, fighting the unnatural force, and in a moment of clarity, I grabbed a loose plank from the bridge. I swung it toward the shadow, but it flowed around it effortlessly, almost laughing inside my mind. The creek's call was absolute, relentless. Escape was impossible, unless I could confront the darkness fully. The shadow surged forward, flowing over the icy surface like living smoke, but I refused to give in. Every muscle in my body screamed to flee, yet my mind fought to resist the pull. I swung the plank again and again, striking nothing but air. Yet somehow, the movement seemed to slow the shadow's advance. The creek bubbled and churned violently, faces twisting in silent screams, reaching upward as though begging for release. The whispers became coherent at last, forming words that cut straight into my soul. Join us. Forever. It's your turn. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. But I summoned every ounce of courage left. I leapt backward toward the far side of the bridge, landing hard on the rotting wood, just as the shadow reached for my feet. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The creek hissed and fumed, the faces vanished beneath the surface, and the shadow recoiled, retreating partially into the water. I realized I had survived. But at what cost? I scrambled to the other side, collapsing against the bridge's railing, shaking and gasping for air. The water beneath was calm now, eerily still, reflecting only moonlight and shadows of trees. The faces were gone, and the shadow had receded. But I knew it was not gone forever. The creek had marked me. I could feel its presence lingering, like icy fingers tracing my spine. I left Maple Creek the next morning, taking only the clothes on my back and my camera, which held images too disturbing to describe. I never returned to that town, and I warn anyone who listens. The bridge waits. The creek feeds on curiosity and fear, patient for the next soul to wander too close. Even now, years later, I hear faint whispers in quiet streams, in the wind, or when I walk near water. And sometimes, in reflections, I catch the shadow moving behind me. Maple Creek Bridge is alive. It never forgets. My name is Lucas Harper, and this happened when I was 26. I had grown up hearing stories about the Black Pine Woods in northern Alberta, a place the locals avoided after dusk. They spoke of whispers that lured travelers into the forest, never to return. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that nonsense. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. One evening, I set out with a flashlight and a notebook, determined to document the woods for a personal project. The trees were thick and ancient, their blackened trunks stretching impossibly high. A cold fog rolled in, hugging the forest floor, and every step I took seemed to vanish into the mist. Shadows shifted unnaturally around me, and I could swear the air itself carried faint voices calling my name. At first, I laughed it off, but then I heard the whisper again, closer this time. Lucas, soft, breathy, and undeniably real. I froze. The woods were no longer empty. I tried to steady my breathing, convincing myself it was the wind. But the whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming words I couldn't fully understand. Each step forward made the forest denser, the fog thicker, as if I were being swallowed by the woods themselves. The flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of movement among the trees, shapes too fleeting to identify. Then I noticed something terrifying. The trees themselves seemed to lean inward, branches stretching toward me like grasping fingers. The path I thought I had followed vanished behind me, replaced by more trees and fog. Panic settled in, but I couldn't turn back. The forest had no edges, no exit. A cold hand brushed my shoulder, invisible yet firm, sending a jolt of fear through me. The whispers coalesced into a single phrase. "You shouldn't be here." I realized then that Black Pine Woods didn't just hold secrets. It hunted those who dared enter. I stumbled forward, heart hammering, the whispers now circling me like a living presence. Every direction I looked, the forest seemed alive. Shadows moved independently, and shapes darted between trees, too fast for me to identify. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, and I realized my flashlight wasn't illuminating the path. It was highlighting the eyes of something watching from the darkness. Branches scratched my arms and face, as if trying to hold me back. The whispers grew urgent, overlapping into a deafening chorus. "Come closer. Come closer." I tried calling out, but my voice was swallowed instantly, absorbed into the fog. The air grew thick, almost tactile, pressing against my chest and slowing my breathing. Then I saw them, figures emerging from the mist. Pale, elongated, and featureless, they moved silently, drifting toward me. My instincts screamed to run, but the path twisted impossibly, leading me deeper, forcing me toward them. The forest wanted me, and I was already too deep to escape. I ran blindly, branches clawing at my clothes, the whispers following me with every step. The pale figures glided effortlessly behind me, their featureless faces reflecting nothing but darkness. The fog thickened, obscuring the path, forcing me to stumble over roots and rocks. Each time I fell, the whispers grew louder, circling my head, chanting numbers 1, 2, 3. Like a countdown to something I didn't want to know. I tried to scream, but my voice only echoed back distorted, layered with others I couldn't recognize. The forest seemed to twist around me, closing in, the trees bending unnaturally as if alive. Something cold brushed my neck, a hand or a branch, but I knew it wasn't natural. Then the shadows separated slightly, forming a corridor of mist. The figures stopped at the edge, watching silently, beckoning me forward. I knew, with chilling clarity, that stepping into that mist meant I might never return. Yet every instinct in me felt drawn toward it. I stepped cautiously into the corridor of mist, every nerve on fire. The pale figures didn't move, yet I felt their attention pressing against me from every angle. The whispers became a low, throbbing hum, vibrating in my chest, counting faster now, 4, 5, 6, like the pulse of the forest itself. My flashlight flickered, and in its brief light, I saw the shapes shifting unnaturally, stretching toward the sky and bending around the trees. The air grew icy, my breath visible in ragged clouds. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift, roots twisting like serpents, pulling me slightly off balance. I stumbled but caught myself, heart hammering. Then one of the figures glided closer, stopping just a few feet away. Its featureless face tilted slightly, studying me. Though it didn't speak, I felt the weight of its intent. I was being evaluated, measured, chosen. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I was trapped in the forest's will. Black pine woods had claimed me as its next story. The corridor of mist twisted, and the figures shifted subtly, guiding me deeper. My pulse thundered as the whispers layered into a single, chilling sentence. "You cannot leave." Every step I took felt weighted, as if invisible hands pressed against my back, nudging me forward. The trees themselves seemed to lean closer, branches forming jagged arches overhead, casting shadows that danced like living beings. Then the mist parted slightly, revealing a small clearing. In the center, a faintly glowing tree stood, its bark black as night, its branches bending unnaturally downward, dripping dark sap that shimmered crimson in the flashlight's beam. The figures stopped at the edge of the clearing, their attention fixed entirely on me. I realized that this tree was the heart of the forest, and approaching it meant surrendering to whatever power ruled Black Pine Woods. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. The whispers became pleading now, almost human, coaxing me closer, promising release or something far worse. I stepped closer to the glowing black tree, heart hammering, breath ragged. The figures remained at the edge of the clearing, silent but attentive, their pale, elongated forms swaying slightly, like reeds in a wind only they could feel. The whispers intensified, layering into multiple voices, all pleading and warning at once. "Do not touch. Do not touch." But curiosity and terror drove me forward. As I reached the tree, the air grew heavier, thick with a metallic scent that made my stomach twist. The sap shimmered brighter, and the shadows behind the figures seemed to lengthen unnaturally, bending toward me. A sudden gust of icy wind knocked me off balance, and I caught a glimpse of something inside the tree. Faces, hundreds of them, twisted in silent screams, trapped beneath the bark, watching, waiting. The whispers became coherent, almost urgent. "You can leave, but at a cost." My legs trembled. I realized that the forest didn't just claim souls, it fed on them, and now it wanted to decide my fate. I froze, realizing the tree was pulsing in rhythm with the whispers, almost like a heartbeat. The figures began moving, gliding silently closer, their elongated limbs bending in unnatural angles. The air thickened, pressing against my chest, and I could feel my heartbeat synchronizing with the rhythm of the forest. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet my body refused. The whispers became louder, more commanding. "Give yourself, or be claimed." I felt an irresistible pull toward the tree, my hands moving involuntarily, drawn to the bark. The faces within twisted, mouths opening wider, silent screams echoing in my mind. My flashlight slipped from my hands, clattering to the forest floor, and the clearing was plunged into deeper shadow, illuminated only by the crimson glow of the tree. I understood then that stepping closer could either free me or make me part of the forest forever. Black Pine Woods demanded a choice, and the figures waited patiently, unblinking, for me to decide. I stood frozen, hands trembling, as the pull toward the black tree became almost unbearable. The whispers layered into a deafening roar in my mind, repeating my name over and over. "Lucas, Lucas, Lucas." My body moved without consent, stepping closer, closer to the glowing bark, each footfall echoing like a death knell in the silent forest. The pale figures hovered at the edge of the clearing, eyes fixed on me, their elongated limbs stretching unnaturally, ready to guide me or claim me. I reached out with shaking fingers, almost touching the tree. At that exact moment, the faces embedded in the bark twisted violently, mouths opening in silent screams. The whispers shifted, urgent and pleading. "Leave! Leave! Leave now!" A surge of clarity hit me. I pulled my hand back and ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, the figures gliding after me, but only watching, letting me escape. I didn't look back, yet the tree's crimson glow lingered in my mind, haunting every step I took. I emerged from black pine woods, just as the first light of dawn pierced the fog. My legs shook, lungs burned, and my mind raced with images of the glowing tree and the pale figures. The forest behind me was silent again, as though it had never existed. Yet I knew better. Black pine woods didn't forgive or forget. It waited. I returned home, but the whispers never left. In quiet moments, I hear them faintly, repeating my name, counting softly as if the forest still tracks me. I never returned to Alberta, and I warn anyone who listens, curiosity can be deadly. The woods are patient, intelligent, and always hungry for the next soul who dares wander too far from the path. Black pine woods will wait for you, and when you hear the whispers, you may already be too late. My name is Emma Foster, and this happened when I was 29. I had inherited a small farm near Willow Creek, Alberta, from a distant relative I barely knew. Locals spoke of the place in whispers, warning that the land was cursed, that families vanished without a trace. I didn't believe in such stories, until the first night I arrived. The farmhouse was old, its paint peeling and windows clouded with decades of dust. The wind moaned through broken shutters, carrying faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. As I explored the property, I noticed something strange. The fields beyond the house were unnaturally dark, as if the shadows refused to follow the sun. The creek behind the farm moved sluggishly, reflecting no light at all, just an inky black surface that seemed to absorb the moon. That night, as I settled into the creaking farmhouse, I heard the first footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing along the hallway outside my bedroom. Only, I was alone. I froze in bed, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. The footsteps stopped abruptly, then resumed, slower now, circling the house as if inspecting it. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the hallway, but it was empty. No sign of anyone, yet the floorboards bore wet, muddy footprints leading toward the basement door. The whispers began, faint and unintelligible at first, then clearer. "Leave, leave, before it takes you." My hands shook as I descended the basement steps. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and something far older, something rotten. Shadows twisted across the walls in impossible patterns, shifting as if alive. At the far end of the basement, I saw it. A small doorway I hadn't noticed before. One that wasn't on any blueprint of the house. Beyond it was complete darkness, and from that darkness came a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails drumming on wood. Something waited inside, and it was aware of me. I hesitated at the small doorway, flashlight trembling in my hand. The rhythmic tapping continued, echoing faintly like a heartbeat from the darkness beyond. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped through, and the air changed instantly. It was colder, heavier, and smelled of earth and decay. The floor beneath me was soft, almost sponge-like, and the walls seemed to pulse subtly, as if the house itself were alive. Deeper in the darkness, I glimpsed shapes, indistinct at first, but unmistakably human. Shadows twisted and moved unnaturally, some clinging to the walls, others suspended in midair. They were not alive, yet they weren't fully dead either. The whispers became intelligible, echoing names I didn't recognize, mingled with screams of terror. I realized these were the lost souls of Willow Creek Farm, trapped for decades, watching, waiting, and pleading. A sudden sound, a metallic clang, made me jump, and I realized the basement door had slammed shut behind me. I was trapped, and whatever lived in that darkness was now aware of me. I took careful steps forward, the whispers growing louder, overlapping into a cacophony of pleading, screaming voices. Shapes emerged more clearly now, pale, twisted, and faceless, hovering just above the floor. I could feel their attention on me, like eyes pressing into my back. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the door was gone, replaced by an endless black void that stretched before me. Then I noticed a figure in the far corner, smaller, hunched, yet unmistakably human. It turned slowly, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to see directly into my soul. The tapping came from its hand, lightly drumming on a wooden box. The air vibrated with its presence, chilling me to my core. The whispers now formed words, clearer than ever. You came. Now you stay. My mind reeled. I realized the farm didn't just hold secrets. It devoured people, trapping their souls to feed whatever haunted the basement. And now, I was its next victim. I stepped closer, heart pounding, my flashlight barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. The pale, faceless figures began to drift toward me, silent yet purposeful, their elongated shadows stretching across the basement walls. Each step I took made the floor beneath me feel unstable, like it could swallow me whole at any moment. The whispers layered into a deafening chorus, chanting names, some familiar, some unknown, and all seemed to belong to people who had vanished from Willow Creek Farm over the decades. The hunched figure in the corner stopped drumming and slowly turned its head toward me, revealing a hollow emptiness where its face should have been. Its presence radiated a hunger so intense it pressed on my chest. I realized then that the wooden box it had been tapping on was more than a box. It was a vessel, holding the essence of every person the farm had claimed. Panic surged, but there was nowhere to run. The shadows closed in, and the house seemed to exhale, pulling me deeper into the nightmare. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my balance as the whispers grew urgent, almost commanding. Stay, stay, stay. The box rattled violently, and the hunched figure rose slowly, stretching taller than any human should, its limbs bending unnaturally. The faceless figures closed in from all sides, drifting just above the floor like wraiths, and I felt their icy presence pressing against me. The basement seemed to expand impossibly, walls elongating, twisting, and the ceiling rising higher than the farmhouse should allow. Every step I tried to take backward was thwarted by invisible resistance. The air thickened, making it hard to breathe, and the scent of earth, rot, and decay overwhelmed me. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into pitch darkness, illuminated only by faint red glimmers emanating from the wooden box. I realized with a growing horror that the house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. And it wanted me to join the countless souls trapped within its walls forever. I forced myself to take a step forward, drawn toward the wooden box despite every instinct screaming to flee. The faceless figures hovered closer, their elongated limbs stretching unnaturally, almost like they were reaching inside me. The red glow from the box pulsed with each beat of my heart, and I realized it wasn't light, it was life. The box contained the trapped souls, feeding the house, sustaining it, and now it wanted me. The hunched figure loomed over the box, its empty gaze fixed on me. I could feel its hunger, the weight of centuries pressing down. The whispers became urgent, desperate. Give yourself, or be claimed. My hands shook uncontrollably, yet I felt my fingers inching toward the box. One brush against it could bind me forever, a part of the farm's cursed legacy. I froze, terror paralyzing me, realizing that the decision wasn't about survival. It was about surrender or defiance. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, echoing off the basement walls. The faceless figures pressed closer, their presence unbearable, and the hunched figure raised its arms, causing shadows to writhe across the floor like living tentacles. The box trembled violently, the red glow intensifying, as if sensing my fear. Every instinct in me screamed to run, yet the doorway I had entered was gone, replaced by an endless black void. I realized then that the house thrived on fear and indecision. The longer I hesitated, the more it claimed me. The figures swirled around me, and the air thickened, suffocating. My mind raced. Images of missing families, countless trapped souls flashing in my memory like a nightmare montage. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped away from the box, shouting at the faceless figures, trying to assert my will. The basement shuddered violently, as if testing my resolve. I had a choice: surrender to the house's hunger or fight for escape. I took a deep breath and made my move, stepping away from the glowing box and toward the corner of the basement. The faceless figures recoiled slightly, their elongated shadows stretching unnaturally as if in protest. The whispers became frantic, pleading, and I could feel the house itself vibrating with rage. Every instinct screamed for me to run, and I finally did, diving toward a faint outline of the original basement door. As I reached it, the red glow from the box flared violently, casting grotesque shadows across the walls. I heard a chorus of silent screams echoing in my mind, the voices of those trapped for decades, warning me, cursing me, and pleading simultaneously. My hand slammed against the doorknob, prying it open as the house shook violently, the basement floor rippling like water. I pushed through, stumbling into the farmhouse hallway, breathless and shaking, but alive. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. Willow Creek Farm had released its grip, but it had marked me. I burst out of the farmhouse into the cold Alberta night, gasping for air, my legs shaking uncontrollably. The wind carried the faintest echoes of the whispers, trailing behind me like invisible chains. The farmhouse loomed behind me, silent once again. Yet I knew it had not forgiven me. Willow Creek Farm was patient, and it would wait for the next curious soul. Even now, years later, I cannot forget the red glow, the faceless figures, or the hollow gaze of the hunched figure. I hear faint whispers in the wind near old abandoned buildings, and I swear I feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking me. The farm had wanted to claim me, and though I escaped, it left its mark. An eternal reminder of the danger that lurks in the forgotten corners of Alberta. If you ever find yourself near Willow Creek, remember, curiosity can be deadly. The farm waits, and sometimes it wins. These 7 disturbing true stories from Alberta's small towns remind us that darkness often hides in the places we least expect. From abandoned farmhouses and haunted bridges to whispering woods and sinister forests, each tale carries a warning. The line between curiosity and danger is razor thin, and once crossed, it may be impossible to return. Each of these stories comes from real experiences, shared by ordinary people who found themselves face to face with the unexplainable. They are not legends or campfire tales. They are documented encounters with the unknown, where fear became reality. From shadows that stalked travelers, to faceless figures, to cursed objects that devoured souls, tonight you have glimpsed the hidden horrors that Alberta's forgotten corners hold. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.